Once again, I would like to apologize. The internet speed and connection was very shaky, wasn't consistent, so I decided to continue with another video of my continuation of The Last of Us 2 spoiler review. But overall, like the story was very interesting just to begin with, and I kind of thought from the trailers and everything that we saw, prior to the release of the game and the previews, I kind of thought it was going to be a Joel and Ellie experience. I thought, how Ellie was following Joel and leading, and he was leading her along the way in The Last of Us 1, even though you did have the opportunity to play with her in the second half of the game. I thought it was going to be Joel just being that NPC companion with Ellie guiding her, protecting her, making sure that she's always good. But the fact that in The Last of Us 1, the original game, it really didn't allude to any of the prior transgressions that Joe committed throughout his, tenureship, from the time the outbreak started to the time that his daughter actually was killed, and up until the initial Boston interaction that he'd had with the Fireflies and Ellie initially when he decided to take her on as a job. We don't really know what Tommy and Joe was doing in those particular years to survive. And it was alluded to, several times in the game. And I remember there was a scene where Joel and Tommy were talking, and Tommy was basically telling Joel, like, hey, he's not going to bring Ellie to the Fireflies. And, he told Joel he remembers all of the things that he had gone through with him throughout the initial tenureship that they went through after Joel's daughter died initially. So we really didn't know. So pick up in The Last of Us 2, you got Abby. Abby is the daughter of one of the surgeons that Joel actually killed in The Last of Us 2, and, you really didn't have a choice in The Last of Us, the original game, to kill that doctor or to kill that surgeon or not. You just had to kill him so that you can then get to Ellie, which he did, of course. So Abby is seeking revenge. She wants to go after Joel and get justice for her father. And he does. Joel dies one of the most gruesome ways in the game. And the way he died was more of the issue for me, because like he helped Abby get out of a tight situation, and then Abby brought him back to her camp, and Joel was just so forth willing to share who he was, who Tommy was, where their camp is located, with this band of people that he didn't know. Where I kind of thought it was out of Joel's character to do that, because if you remember, he was so guarded. He didn't trust anyone. He felt like he didn't need anyone, and I don't think like it played up to the character that Naughty Dog created for him to be. Joel's not a guy that's coming forth with information with strangers that he doesn't even know, that he doesn't even trust yet, but he did. And I believe that ultimately cost him his life, where he was beaten with a golf club by Abby, seeking justice for Joel killing her father. So the first half of the game, you spend playing the game as Ellie, seeking vengeance, trying to find the location of Abby and her group. So it leads them back to Seattle, and they find themselves in Seattle where Abby's group is. And basically Ellie is going through every individual person in that group to get to Abby, and she's killing her best friend, she's killing Abby's boyfriend, she's killing key members in the group in order to get justice. And ultimately she's looking for justice for what Abby did to Joel, which I kind of thought it was. You know, Abby's story, the second half of it, it gives you a different understanding and build on who she is as a character. When you first initially see her killing Joe, you're like, well, who's this big brute of a female? Like what is her story? And come to find out, the way Naughty Dog played it off was pretty good, because they allowed you to grow to like Abby. I grew to like her principles, what she stood on, what she was about, what she respected, what she wasn't going to tolerate. She's a very straightforward woman, very dominant woman, but at the same time, she does have a softer side. And throughout the game, you'll see that softer side that she shows for different people that she cared about in her life. But I thought her character was pretty cool. Um, you know, there was scenes in the game that I really didn't see the point in seeing. There was a sex scene that Abby had with, her on again, off again boyfriend. I was like, well, okay. There was a highly over a overreach of Naughty Dog representing the gay community and the transvestite community and the lesbian community. It was very prominent in the game. It was in your face. It was something that you couldn't avoid. And I didn't think The Last of Us was that type of game. Yeah, it had sprinkles of it where it told different stories of different situations people were in, but it was kind of like the bell that kept ringing over and over in this game. And in this particular universe that they created, it's kind of like just survival of the fittest. There's a lot of tribalism going on, and I didn't think that you know the sexuality of people plays such a prominent part in the story, especially if you played the original Last of Us. There wasn't really much of that other than the DLC, which was the Left Behind DLC. Um, but Abby's going through some things. Like I said, Ellie kills all of her friends. Then Abby comes in return, kills a couple of her friends, and then ultimately it gets to the point where they get to the point where it's like, is it really worth it to continue on with this beef and battle because nobody wins at the end of the day? And at the end of the game, there's a fight scene where Ellie and Abby is fighting, and Ellie get her fingers bitten off by Abby, but Abby doesn't want to fight, but Ellie's kind of forcing the issue, so she has no choice. But ultimately, Ellie then realizes that, at the end of the day, I'm assuming that she's like, well, what's the point of this? Nothing good ever comes from this. Nothing good ever comes from, you killing me killing you. It just doesn't stop. And ultimately, she stopped fighting and she lets Abby go. And Abby gets on the boat and she goes away. So the story is pretty decent. Other than the fact that the way they killed off Joel, I think they could have went about that a little differently, but they were kind of early, direct, and set in mindset of killing Joel, one of the most beloved characters in The Last of Us. Um, the the Last of Us game kind of reminds me of this movie called The Road. I don't know if you guys ever saw that, but it's a really cool movie where a man and his son are traveling in this post-apocalyptic world, and this man is willing to do anything and everything to ensure that his son survives. And the things that they go through, and the things he teaches his son, and things of that nature, it was so heartfelt because it showed the unconditional love that a human being can have for another. And I kind of line that up with the Joel and Ellie relationship. He was really like a father figure to her, so much that when he was killed in front of her, she kind of went blood drunk. She kind of felt like she had no choice but to represent and to go after her killer, just so that she could avenge him, which is respectful. But there were several times in the game where I thought it kind of broke the immersion, where there was a scene where Ellie was located in a farm with Dina, which was her girlfriend, who was actually pregnant also at the same time, and they had a young child there, and Ellie was more motherly like, and they were living that life. And Tommy showed up to the farmhouse, and Tommy was like, "Hey, you promised me that you were going to go after this girl to avenge Joe's death when he died. Now you're just sitting here nice on the farm, so now everything's cool." So, um, it's quite interesting to see, you know, um, how Ellie was so willing and eager to say, you know what, I need to avenge Joel's death when she already had a life set, and she was really already set in her ways, and a lot of the times, and I didn't think she had to give up her whole livelihood, her whole way of life with Dina, which they had, and they were so comfortable, and she decided to do so and to pursue Abby once more. But overall, like I said, the story was decent. The story was a decent story. I think if it was more made into a movie, it probably would have hit better. It probably would have hit differently. It probably would have been more manageable and more acceptable by the masses. But because of that one single thing of killing off Joel, I think a lot of people were kind of taken back and kind of like, what they all set with, the current circumstances of how the game started and how the game ended. But I think overall, the game is a great game. Now let's get into gameplay. Um, the gameplay of The Last of Us is pretty good. I mean, you have one of the top, graphically inclined companies such as Naughty Dog, the creators of Uncharted, putting together a masterpiece. Not only was The Last of Us, the original game, a masterpiece on the PS3, and also came to the PS4 as a remastered. The Last of Us 2 was released on the PS4, which I know will be a remaster for the PS5, so we will be able to get it, I'm sure, some particular time for the PS5. And it's more than most likely going to look that much better. But I think, you know, this company knows what they're doing. They know how to make single player narrative games. And while I get some people are against the outcry of the representation of homosexuality and gays and things of that nature in this game, I think it was a well told story. I think it was a story of vengeance, where The Last of Us One was more of a story of love, of unconditional love for somebody that you don't know, and then ultimately putting everything on the line and deciding, is their love worth you sacrificing your life for? Where Joel did it for Ellie in The Last of Us One. Now she's done it for him in The Last of Us Two. So I think the story was really good. The gameplay was pretty cool too. They introduced some new mechanics. You can now go prone. You can lay on your stomach in the game, climb under vehicles. You can also shoot weapons while you're laying on your stomach, and also while you're laying on your back while you're prone, which is really good. It brings more of a different diversion to the game that wasn't there in the first one. Shooting is the same. Some people have an issue with the shooting that Naughty Dog does in their games, such as the Uncharted's and The Last of Us. I think The Last of Us shooting is a lot better than the Uncharted games, but there's still some people who have an issue with that. But I found the shooting solid to me. A slew of new weapons, shotguns, assault rifles with silencers. The bow makes its way back. And of course, there's different skill trees that you can invest in when playing this game, so you can play in a completely different way than somebody else's. So there's replayability there again. What I also like about the immersion in the game is the way a lot of fights happen naturally. Like you'll be, rummaging through the forest or rummaging through the bush. You'll kill one guy, and if his soldier friend sees you kill him or finds his body, he'll yell out that person's name, and then they'll go where they think your last location was. But if you're quick enough, you're able to flank them and go around and get in a new position. I think it brought really immersive, tactical guerrilla warfare type experience to the game. The melee in this game is pretty good too. They also brought a dodge button, I believe, which is R1 or L1, excuse me, I believe it's L1, that allow you to dodge melee attacks and then allow you to counter with different type of strikes depending on the weapons that you have in your hand. So, like how in The Last of Us 1, you're able to just keep spamming square whenever you're fighting somebody, and they'll never be able to attack you. Well, this one is not like that. They'll counter, they'll block, you know what I mean, and things of that nature. So it kind of brought a very immersive, realistic experience far as how somebody really would be fighting you in combat. You know what I mean? In a lot of ways, there were several points in the game where I feel like you were taking down maybe 5 or 10 people at a time, but you weren't doing it just at one time. You were going from area to area. You were doing different maneuvers. Verticality in this game exists. You can climb on things. Ellie has a jump button. You know what I mean? So she can jump. She can jump further off ledges, 2 ledges, grapple on ledges now. Also, breaking glass. Breaking glass was something that you couldn't do in the original game, in the sense of just taking your knife and breaking the glass. Now you can do that. You can throw objects at glass. So it's really good the way that they went about this. They've also added new enemy types to the game. And that's a really cool and different element and take on this game, because when you think of The Last of Us, you think of the monsters being the enemy, but the real enemies in the game that you really should be afraid of are the human beings. The monsters are just reacting the way that they're going to react. But the human beings are the real monsters, who are unpredictable, who are cutthroat, and more ruthless than the monsters. So I think overall they did a really good job on explaining that and making sure that the general public grasps the idea and the premise of this world that they're trying to create. The world felt lived in. The world felt like it was actually people there one day, people there tomorrow. Like you can go to an area scavenging for weapons and things of that nature, and then ultimately you may run across a scout of three or four enemies, and you'll take them out, and then you'll continue to scout, and you'll run across another batch of enemies. So the combat is spread out, the gameplay experience is spread out, and it's a more well-rounded, paced game. Um, I believe the original Last of Us was about maybe 15 hours, 20 hours. This one is about a good solid 25 hours, I would say, 20, 25 hours, I would say. It's not something that you're just going to run through like the original Last of Us. I've, over the years, been able to run through The Last of Us in a day, and maybe about 6, 7 hours, 8 hours, you would say, depending on what you're doing and if you're skipping cutscenes, things of that nature. But this game is long. This game, you're not just going to run through it in a day. Why would you want to? Um, it's a graphical masterpiece. Especially when it rains, you can see the clothes are wet. You can see the footprints in the mud. I mean, you just feel so well immersed in the game. Like if you shoot somebody, they don't just die right there on the spot. And if you hear them choking, you hear them crying out for help, depending on where you shot them at, depending on who's around. It just gives you a real immersive, all around good world that you feel like is lived in and that's real. And once again, I think Naughty Dog did a great job at that. I don't think they're going to make a Last of Us 3 though. Just the way that this game ended, where Abby went her way, Ellie went her way, and they moved on. I don't think it's going to be a Last of Us 3 coming anytime soon. And if it is, it's probably going to be for the PlayStation, 6 or something like that, I think. I'm still wondering if they're going to relaunch any DLC for this particular game, let alone multiplayer, because we know multiplayer was a very big platform for The Last of Us, the original game. People are still playing it today. So I think overall, a lot of games like myself were waiting for the multiplayer to pop up, and we'll see how that goes. But I think overall, the game is a really good game. I definitely would recommend it. I'm not giving out no scores. You can look for other websites to do that. I play these games for what they are. If it's a bad game, I'll tell you if it's a bad game. If it's a good game, I'll tell you it's a good game. Just my opinion. But I think overall, The Last of Us is a really good game. It took elements from the first game and made them better in the second game, and it grew. It grew a lot on us. And now that we no longer have Joel around as one of the main characters that you play as, that's beloved. Um, it's good to see that Ellie's still alive. It's good to see that Abby's still alive, because now you can build on either one of them. And these characters are characters now that are engraved in this Last of Us universe. And I'm just interested to see what Neil Druckmann does with the DLC. Maybe you have some flashback moments of playing with Joel, in the DLC. Who knows? You know what I mean? What kind of adventures that Naughty Dog will put together for this spectacular game. But I think overall, they did a really good job at creating this masterpiece. And I hope that people support it. Overall, look past your differences, your biases, and just play the game for what it is. Play the game for the interactive story that it's telling, and for the interactive story that it is, and maybe you'll get something out of it. I know I got a lot out of it. I got a lot out of the second one. So I know that the third one, if there is a third one, they got a lot of big shoes to fill, and I think they will. There's one thing that I would prefer if they were to do. I would like them to make it a semi-open world game. In the first half of this game, you have somewhat of a semi open space. I'm not going to say open world, but it was a more of an open space where you were able to ride a horse from place to place and investigate. I think that this game lends well to that due to the atmosphere that you're in this post apocalyptic world. So I would prefer or like for Naughty Dog to create this semi or just a small open world for The Last of Us 3 if they decide to, so that people can feel more vested in it, other than feeling like, there's only so far you can go. Like the background is so beautiful, but you will never be able to go to what you see in the background. Like in Zelda, anywhere you see in Zelda, you'll be able to go there. And I kind of think that would probably be the next step um, for The Last of Us 3 if they just ever decide to make one. But listen, man, those are my opinions on The Last of Us 2. I enjoyed it. I would tell you go out and get it. If you're still on the fence, I understand. Look at some reviews, look at some gameplay, and see if it's something for you. If you enjoy The Last of Us 1, then I think you enjoy The Last of Us 2. And I know I gave away a lot of the plot spoilers in the game, but I did put in the title that this is a spoiler review. So, it's just my humble opinion about this magnificent game. Once you go out and check it out, give it a shot, and let me know what you think. Anyway, guys, I'm Troy. This is Troy. Let's Talk Real. This is Black Talk today. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share the video. Peace.